push together.
Very well then, time now for that discussion about the election period and of course the economy and how the elections affects the economy in this side of the Sahara. We want to just dive right into that conversation, but before we get to that, I'll have reactions from my colleague Moige William, who talked to Kenyans about what they think about how elections, how the political season and how an electioneering cycle affects the economy. Of course, before I give you statistics, let's listen in to what Kenyans had to say about the electioneering period and how it's going to affect the business environment. Listen in.
Well, indeed, thank you. Back in studio, and today we have made our way to Mbeere South here in Embu County to engage residents of Mbeere South. And today's discussion we focus on election and business. In the previous patterns, we have seen that election year business people have been affected due to the uncertain times due to elections. And here in Keretiro, we get to engage a number of them. What are their expectations, noting that 2022 is an election year ahead of the August polls, the August general polls. Let's hear from residents here in Keretiro. Thank you for your time, Hapa KTN News. Maybe what are your expectations in terms of business and the election? Starting with your name.
My name is Pete Nguru, a resident of Mbeere South. Well, the expectation could be not very high as far as the election period is concerned, especially on our side where our economy is agricultural based. And majority are farmers in Mira business, are farmers in Mira, and also others in business in Mira in the same. So election seems to be a little bit peaceful because it's somehow structured. It is somehow structured because on one hand of Azimio, on the other hand of Kenya Kwanza, they seem to have a certain trajectory that may end up having a less tensions election.
Thank you. Ma'am, kwa dakika moja tu maoni yako ni yepi kuhusiana na biashara na ukiwa huu ni mwaka wa siasa na uchaguzi?
Kwa majina naitwa Mary Makao. Kulingana na maoni yangu naona ni kama mwaka huu iko tofauti kidogo. Kwa sababu ukienda kuangalia hata mapato imerudi chini kidogo. Baada shukari ilikuwa inatoka like 90 kwa kilo moja, sasa ni 100 na kitu. So uchumi ni kama sijui ni kurudi chini ama ni kupanda, sielewi. But maisha imepanda kidogo, vitu vimepanda. Kwa hivyo hata nikumaliza hata vile siasa itakuwa ni kama naona kama itakuwa imepanda. Tunaomba tu kukuwe na imani, na amani wakati tunafanya siasa. Kwa sababu tukiangalia tunaona tu katika area yetu watu wenyewe especially hakuna pesa na tunaamini tu mwenye atakuja yeyote vile. Tunaomba tuzingatie siasa za amani, walete pesa, wasilete pesa, tumejua haki zetu sisi kama Wakenya.
Okay, asante. Well, there you have it from a number of residents here in Keretiro, Mbeere South. Remember, the past 3 years has been tough for business people in Kenya. Remember, the 2022 general elections come at a time whereby Kenya is still recovering from the negative impact of COVID-19. For now is to wait and see how the polls will go. Still, this is a political season for many business people. The expectation still high that the economy will be better ahead of the 9th August general polls. I'm Moige William, and I now take you back to studio.
Many thanks, my colleague Moige William, there for speaking to Kenyans about their take on the electioneering period and, of course, how it's going to affect the economy. Let me give you a bit of numbers because those reactions are not coming in out of anything. Beg your pardon. So, elections and the economy. Now, the IMF says the country's probability of political instability after elections is about 30 to 50%. Those are telling figures right there, meaning any wrong move and we are in a period of instability. So now, I'd like us to pay attention particularly to the year preceding, the year after the election, all right, and how the Kenya's productivity has performed after that. In 1992, during the clamor for the multi-party democracy, Dr. Julian Rowa, you remember, 0.6%, that was the growth in that electioneering year. Look at the year after that, 1993, it went to 0.3%. In 1997, another electioneering year, 2.4%, that is how the economy grew. Then the year after, it fell by 0.4%. It's almost like a trend. Let's look at 2002, if in case we are are not consistent. 2002, 0.4%. In 2003, that was a transitional election, remember? People are moving from the Kanu regime now to the NAC regime, which we saw a bit of growth right there at 2.9%. And then 2007, we came from 6.9%. Look at the number preceding that, 1.5. Let's give you a bit more of numbers on the same, on how the election, the economy performed in the electioneering year. Now, there's something special about 2010 because that was the year we promulgated the new constitution, and so the growth was at 8.1%. The country was a bit stable and everything was happening properly, and that was a record high, if you ask me. Then 2013, we experienced a 3.8% growth. In 2014, there was a bit of growth still. 2017, 2 elections, actually, 3.7% growth. Then to 2018, we went to 5.6%. And of course, in 2020, we experienced a contraction of 0.3%. The net effect is that private investment is reducing. And even for this year, some private investors have expressed a lot of mistrust in the economic environment. They're shying away from investing. And then the buildings approval by the Nairobi City County have reduced. This is just an example. This is in real estate alone. Reduced by 33% to 1 or 2.9 billion shillings in 2021. And of course, investors are taking a wait-and-see approach in this one. Sources is, the information is from Kenya National Bureau of Statistics and of course the IMF. We are seeing a bit of the slump also in the Nairobi Securities Exchange. I have been speaking to Dr. Julian Rowa, who is in the studio today. Talk to us about these numbers. He is the founder of Schedules Consulting. He'll tell us about it much more. But, Dr. good to see you.
Nice to see you too, and thanks for having me, bro.
I promised you to ask you this question first. When politicians sneeze ahead of polls, the economy takes or catches a bad cold. Why is that phenomenon consistent?
Brian, that's a very interesting phenomenon. Every time politicians take a front seat to discuss political issues, we have learned from history and the data before us that the economy takes a big bashing, a big battering. And the reason that is so is because, one, I think that we have gotten to a place in this country where politics is glorified beyond what I think it should be. Politics is becoming a major aspect of our lives.
And is that a good phenomenon?
It's not a good phenomenon at all.
Why not, Dr.
It is not a good phenomenon because other things should be running the lives of Kenyans other than the politics that we see. We have fed politics for breakfast, we have fed politics for lunch, we have fed politics for dinner. There is a fundamental problem. And what have the politicians done, taking advantage of that situation? They have grasped it, they've grabbed it like anybody else would do to perpetuate their personal interests, which I believe any typical human being, given that opportunity, would do. The question then becomes, should that be the way things go? My response to that is, it's a big no. A big no. We've seen elections in other countries, and we've seen seamless transitions. The impact on the economy has been minimal, if at all. Think about Rwanda. Think about Tanzania. Think about Zambia. Zambia is a very perfect case study of where elections come, transitions happen, and there's continuity of life.
Like a mature democracy,
it's a mature democracy. Go to South Africa as well. So then the fundamental question for us is, what is special about Kenya? For me, two things comes to mind. One, politicians believe that they can do what they do from a place of impunity. There is nothing you can do to us. We can get away with it. So if you look at the legal framework that's supposed to govern this kind of behavior, it has totally collapsed. What else do I see as a big problem here? Again, as politicians, I see a situation where we have glorified politics. And because you have glorified politics, and we can get trade-offs through politics, politicians are getting away with very severe issues. My take is that the discipline that is required of politicians needs to be enforced so that during electioneering period, there's no adverse impact on the economy and our social lives. That to me is where the problem lies.
And I was going to ask you that in another question I had in terms of what we should not do. We are seeing some very radicalizing talk about hate speeches being perpetrated around. We are having talks of madoa and this kind of talks. And you know, we are coming from a point whereby we have fought against ourselves. And then the question then becomes, Dr. Tari, can we move from the voting booth and go and open my boutique, my fish business, my lorry truck to move across counties just after coming out from voting, Dr. Ari? Do you ever foresee that?
Ideally, that's how it should be. Election is not a matter of life and death.
Definitely.
Election is just about choosing leadership so that there's a sense of continuity in our lives. But what do we see? We see the reverse.
That's sad.
You've talked about politicians making pronouncements that are very injurious to our reputation as a country and to our economy as well. Why do they do that? I've said it already. Because they can get away with it. I mean, irrespective of the context in which some of these things are said, if you use the word doa-doa or madoa-doa in a politically charged environment, and we have a history about that particular phrase, and you as a politician see nothing wrong with that, and we as a system also do not have sufficient laws or the spirit to do what? To enforce those laws, then what do you see happening?
People are polarized.
People are polarized, and the behavior continues and it continues. It will just change in form and shape, but it will continue. My take on this is the law enforcement should really come down hard on this kind of elements.
Vigilance should be more?
The vigilance should be more. And people should actually pay a very heavy price for making this kind of pronouncements that have the potential of affecting our economy and our country's stability.
From an economic point of view also, what shouldn't we do in an electioneering year, given that, yes, our truth is that, yes, we get a bit unstable when we are trying to address issues of elections and the economy. What then, from an economic point of view, shouldn't we do? Should we go borrowing or should we not? And what should be invested in that point? We are seeing also things like supplementary budgets coming up, and those are all factors that are going to affect the next regime. And of course, remember, with the statistics we've seen there, after the electioneering year, there's normally a slump. There's normally like almost 8 months before things now start to catch up. And given that, particularly in 2017, there was a repeat election, a petition was in court, and things turned out the way they turned out. What shouldn't we do?
In my view, election year is not the time when you make major decisions for the country. In fairness to the coming regime, you hold that in abeyance until the new office takes over. If we are to be sincere and honest in the way that we do business in the country. So you mentioned about escalating debt at this particular point in time. There must be a policy that governs that, which gives us a cutoff and says, beyond this period, government business will be limited to A, B, C, D. And that includes major appointments in government. So that there's a sense of responsibility in what we do. So that to me is a very, very big cause for concern. Now, what was the other side of your question? Because I think I've addressed one of it.
Well, the other side was at an individual level, at micro level, because much of these decisions are macro. At a micro level, how then should the business person prepare themselves for an electioneering period? What shouldn't they do? What should they escalate maybe their risk analysis in investing in an electioneering period?
Let's appreciate that there will be fear and despondency
definitely
in an electioneering year. And that is because history tells us that that's exactly what happens. So as a business entity, what I would do, or what I would advise us to do, is 1 year before the elections, you find a way of insulating or immunizing your business from the vagaries of politics.
Definitely.
And that could mean maybe, business activations, you accelerate it more the year preceding the elections, so that in the event that there's a slump because of elections, you're properly cushioned. These are some of the conversations that I think business people ought to have. Besides that, again, and you've said it very well, it's how do you mitigate the risks that come with elections? My experience is that most business entities, even corporates, do not sufficiently address the risks that appertain to the electioneering period. And as a result, when these things happen, when these occurrences happen, of course with 5-year frequency, there's a direct hit to their bottom line. So for me, it's a question of going back to the drawing board and saying what could go wrong during this election period and how do we need to go forward in mitigating those, clearly documenting them and enforcing them. That could go a long way in protecting businesses and the corporates.
Let's talk about the role of business groups, advocacy groups. I'm talking about the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, people like Hoteliers Association and the like, their role in this electioneering period. What should they be advocating for, or what should they be championing at the interest of the association members? In 1 minute.
Very, very interesting. these kind of organizations should find a way of collaborating directly with governments. They should be able to bring their fears on the table with governments, and they should try and obtain commitment from government on how their interests will be protected during that period in a way that is enforceable. That is one way to look at it. But to their members, they must go out more and educate them. In preparation for that particular period, so that everybody's, once you are properly informed, once you are properly educated and you're aware, you are able to circumvent some of these issues. So I think they should come out more and educate their members and do more business with government to protect themselves.
Amazing.
Yeah.
All right, your final word as we end the show today on business and elections, the electioneering period.
Politics must not rule our lives. That's what I say. Let's give economy the chance to be at the front of everything that we do. Politicians, as leaders of this country, must be held to account. If we do that, in the latter and the spirit of the law, we should not have problems with electioneering.
We shouldn't have problems with elections. Very well, we have been speaking to Dr. Julian Rowa of Schedules Consulting. He's been talking to us about the state of the electioneering period and, of course, how it's going to affect the economy. How is that going to pan out? We only wait and see. And that's why we end it right here on Business Cafe. Many thanks for your invaluable company.